Started. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our April 2025 Turning West webinar called Leading with Questions, Transforming Your Leadership Approach with Coaching. Today's April 23rd, and it's a delight to be with you in this early spring day. Talk about a very important topic of leadership, how to lead with questions and how to lead in a gentle, more effective way than you might be familiar with. Hi, I'm Dr. Stephen Goodwin. I'm President and CEO of TurningWest. We're an organization development and leadership consulting firm based in Los Angeles with clients across North America and Europe. And we've got clients across all sectors, from government, nonprofit, for-profit, faith-based, agribusiness, the whole gamut. And what we like to say, if you got people, we're your people. So delight to talk to you today about this very important topic. My colleague with me today is our managing consultant, Megan. You want to introduce yourself, Megan?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Megan Sands. I'm managing consultant here at TurningWest and have a background in education and industrial organizational psychology. Thanks for joining us today.
Great. So we're going to talk a lot today about the idea of coaching leadership, and really kind of in a four-part movement here of how to lead with coaching as an approach and a mindset to how you go about your work as a leader. And then discuss the idea of how to ask powerful questions rather than telling and selling, but really leading in a different sort of way, a gentler, but actually a far more effective way, in kind of a surprising way, more effectively by questions that you ask. And then we're going to talk about how to cultivate curiosity and active listening. And then finally, we're going to talk about that coaching conversation itself and what that looks like and how you might start to inculcate this approach into your own leadership. So that's our goals today. And we hope that you'll find this very helpful and useful right away from you. Megan, you want to talk about coaching leadership?
Yeah, so to get us started today, we're going to introduce the idea of coaching leadership and really define what it is that we're talking about. So I'd like you to think back to a favorite coach that you've had in your lifetime, whether it was a sports coach or another aspect, a musical coach, a singing coach, and think about what made them your favorite, what made them really the one that you think of fondly and you really look up to and feel like they made an impact in your life. It likely had to do with a number of things. So one, it's likely that they helped you to grow and helped you to accomplish something new. So they had an ability to really motivate you and had belief in you and supported that you could accomplish the task at hand that you were learning how to master. And so when we think of managing like a coach, we're really talking about an approach to management and leadership that applies these same principles through coaching. And so this includes really guiding. So as the manager attempting to coach rather than teach or tell, you're really guiding and preparing people to succeed with thoughtful guidance, support, and all the information that they need to develop the skill set that they're practicing. We also want to really motivate them and cheer them on, challenge them, give them hard feedback, but really ultimately inspire growth in them and motivate them to succeed. And we want to emphasize too, in this motivation, we want to really tap into the individual's intrinsic motivation and what will really keep them motivated, whether you're there as the coach or not. And so rather than the extrinsic motivation, really intrinsically motivating them to really be the best version of themselves in the workplace in this scenario. And then last but not least, really empower. And so if we want to coach them, we have to believe that they have the capacity to succeed and to grow in this way. And so empowering people to own their decisions, to grow independently, and ultimately to unlock their potential as a leader and a contributor in the organization. And so this is some of the backbone of what it means to manage like a coach that we really encourage you all to consider this morning. So when we're thinking about this in practice, we have a simple example here. And the main difference is in the coaching approach is asking rather than telling or selling. So when faced with a challenge at work, say that you're supervising a team and they're missing deadlines, they've been falling behind on a number of assignments, and you really need to see improvements soon. You need to see a change. So I could step in and say, okay, on the left side, here's how we're going to solve this. We're behind, we are not meeting our deadlines. Here's our plan for how we're going to accomplish it. Here's who's responsible, and just figure out the solution myself as the manager. Or I could ask the supervisor or the individual that's responsible ultimately for this group, and switch and ask them, how do you think that we should approach this? Acknowledging that we've fallen behind, we really need to change something here. So how do you think that we should approach this? What change do you think that we should make? And this really passes the problem solving responsibility from me as the manager to the supervisor, and they own the decision to create a new plan, to come up with a new solution. And the benefit of this second option on the right-hand side is really this opportunity for the supervisor to come up with the solution themselves, to really think critically through the problem and learn how to address this challenge rather than just taking orders from me as someone who might have already figured it out as the manager. And so we want to be thinking about this approach rather than giving them a statement or a set of directions. We really want to switch it to asking them questions. And when we, a few more specifics about kind of what this coaching leadership approach looks like. First, we have really the goal of coaching is to cultivate self-awareness. We want people to better understand themselves, their environment, their leadership style, the patterns of their behavior, and really the impact of those things. So when we switch from kind of telling and directing, giving feedback very directly in that way, to asking questions, okay, how do you think that your team responded in that moment? Or how do you think that impacted the other people in the room? That helps to cultivate that self-awareness in this individual to really reflect on their own style and the impact of really them in the role that they are. And secondly, at the core of coaching leadership is really empowering problem solving. So you, rather than solving the problem yourself, like the first example that we gave this morning, we really want to facilitate discovery for the individual that we're talking to, or the team that we're talking to. So we're empowering them to participate in the problem solving, not just to follow the instructions that have been laid out to them. So this helps to transfer the ownership of challenges so that we are sharing the problem now, and we've collectively come up with the solution, and now are much more bought into trying to resolve it and carry out our plan and execute it. So empowering problem solving is the second kind of key characteristic of coaching leadership. And then third, that I've alluded to already, is intrinsic motivation. So Karen, if we could switch to the next slide. The intrinsic motivation here, we really want to focus on the development of the person. Again, shifting our perspective from being the leader that's telling and directing to being the coach that's helping to motivate and inspire people towards growth. So we really want to give growth-oriented feedback. This doesn't mean that we're not giving direct feedback or we're not giving advice, but that ultimately we're continuing to practice the art of asking questions rather than telling the answer or telling directions. And ultimately, we really, at the root of all of this is really a strengths-based approach. As I said earlier, we need to have the perspective that the people that we're coaching have the ability to grow in the way that we want them to, or the way that they need to support the organization. So we want to build on the strengths that they already have, and really get them to that level of excellence and success. Dr. Goodwin, is there anything you'd like to add at this point about coaching leadership?
You know, this is the put this in the easier said than done category, right? It's so easy and tempting to just want to tell somebody thinking that will be expedient and I'll be quick and I only got a minute and coaching takes too long. But actually, that's a false dichotomy, right? In reality, if I tell and sell, I get so much defensiveness and resistance that I have to overcome that later on, that it takes me longer to take that approach than to take a coaching leadership approach. And really the art of this approach is that it really lasts a longer time than simply telling someone. So think the difference of a drill sergeant giving orders, which only lasts for that brief moment, versus someone who's coaching someone to become self-aware and solve the problems themselves. And now they have those skills to move forward with their own motivation internally to carry that forward in the future. That's a big difference.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's something that when we talk about it, sounds very simple, because part of it is really simple, but there is an art and a skill to asking questions and to applying this approach. We also want to recognize the impact, the positive impact of this approach. So why are we arguing for this approach to leadership? Of course, there might be moments when you might need to direct, and if there's an emergency or things are definitely things are like actually on fire, not just the metaphorical fires that we're putting out throughout the day. But for the most part, when we're leading and managing, we have the time and we need to be strategic about using the time because of these impacts. So when we apply a coaching approach to our leadership, we are really transferring and sharing that ownership, increasing the accountability for people on the team, people that we're coaching. So instead of just one person owning that themselves, they've now shared it with their direct reports, who are actively participating in solving the problem or executing the decision, and moving things forward in the organization. We also see that your performance in critical thinking, in problem solving, and in decision making all increase when you apply this approach, because you're pushing people to do that critical thinking, to problem solve, and to make decisions. It's very easy to carry out decisions. It's much harder to make them. And so we really want to instill an ability to make difficult decisions in our organizations. And this is one of the approaches to do that. We also see that when we apply a coaching mindset to our leadership, that we see increased engagement and motivation from our organizations, from our teams, and those that we're interacting with. So there is definitely a strong correlation and impact on that engagement and motivation. And we know that ends up in increasing their performance, their commitment, and a number of other things in the organization. And ultimately, this is a very relational approach. It takes time. It shows that you care about the individual and their growth, and people take that to heart and really trust you as someone who cares about them and cares about building a relationship in the workplace to help them to succeed. So we see that trust and relationships really are impacted in a positive way with this approach as well. We also see that when you're able to apply a coaching mindset, your team is going to be less dependent on you and less dependent on you to micromanage or to get into the details and very clearly direct every single assignment and every single task, because you have instilled this ownership, allowed them to take some of that responsibility and be more independent in their approach to solving and carrying out the work. We also decrease, very related to this idea, leadership bottlenecks in the organization. So rather than having to come through their manager to make a decision, they're able to make that decision on their own. They understand where their decision-making authority lies, and they can carry on without waiting for that next one-on-one or team meeting to get approval. This also overall decreases kind of a passive or a passive-aggressive approach and behavior of individuals in the organization, because now they're participating in this process and they're much more active and, again, responsible. We also decrease defensiveness and resistance to ideas, because we often in our work, whether it's coaching or strategic planning or other initiatives in the organization, we really focus on the idea of bringing people into the process to help decide the decisions rather than selling them once the decisions are already made. Because we as people are not often sold very easily. We push back when people want to tell us and direct us very specifically with what we need to do. And so in order to really genuinely engage with them and decrease this defensive and resistance, we bring them in and invite them into the process from the beginning. On the next slide, we also distinguish a little bit. So as we're talking about this, we want to acknowledge and kind of clarify that today we're talking about the first box here. We're talking about coaching as a leadership and management style. So this is an approach, a mindset, and something that you can apply whether you are just attending the webinar today and want to practice these things after we leave today. This really is a daily approach for leaders in how you interact with people day in and day out. It helps your team members to think critically and solve problems for themselves. And you're using coaching skills like asking questions, active listening, and really empowering your team members. So this is what we're focused on for the majority of today's session, so that you have something really tangible to walk away with. The second box here, and what we want to differentiate this from, is when you have a formal executive coach and a formal leadership development process in this. So you, on the flip side, or a much more direct approach to coaching, is when you have a structured one-on-one engagement with someone who's certified as an executive coach. So we at TurningWest also provide this service, and this really advances leadership development for individuals to increase their self-awareness, strategic thinking. Maybe they want to increase their executive presence, their ability to really show up as a leader and present and communicate really effectively, as well as change management, team leadership, and a number of other things. So the value of applying this day to day in your workplace is really in the culture that you're inspiring and fostering in your organization. And when you have specific need to speak to people external to your organization to solve problems and rehearse things out with an external coach, then that would be the process of a formal executive coach. And so we encourage and really invite our clients to participate in both aspects of this. And even often when we're in an executive coaching relationship, we're often teaching this coaching mindset every time we're meeting with our clients, reminding them as we're solving problems or they're coming up with a challenge, we often are asking them questions and reminding them to take a coaching approach with their leaders as well. Anything else you want to add about executive coaching versus this style of leadership, Steve?
Yeah, so what we're talking about is we're not suggesting that every encounter is a coaching encounter as a formal sense, like an executive coach you might engage as a leader, but it has all these elements of coaching as a mindset and as a daily approach of asking questions. So a lot of the same skills go back and forth, and you'll find that this really has a magnificent effect on the people you lead, the team, the environment, the culture of your team and your organization, and it really makes a huge difference. And as we think about how you go forward and ask powerful questions, it's interesting to note that in the last 15 years or so, there's a new theory of leadership development called discursive leadership. And what discursive leadership as a leadership theory discusses is that the magic of what leaders do happens in the way they use language to interact with their people. It's a fascinating new branch of research to kind of diagnose the way in which leaders talk and talk about things shapes that leadership follower interaction. And this is very much in the mindset of asking these great questions as a part of that language that leaders use to really get to great results. So Karen, if we can advance a slide or two here. I would suggest that one of the key things that leaders are always trying to do is create awareness, self-awareness. We know from research in leadership that that's at the heart of what makes a great leader, is the leader themselves has enough self-awareness around them. So how do you get that? That's the magic question. How do you get to awareness? What triggers awareness? Well, I would suggest to you that questions trigger curiosity. That if you offer answers, and going back to what Megan said earlier, if you just give answers and tell and sell, what you're really doing is you're shutting down curiosity. Curiosity is one of the cues to triggering awareness. I like to tell a quick story here. I had a high school coach in my tennis team in high school. I wasn't a really great tennis player, but I really love the sport. And in the middle of this match one day, my coach came over and he said, Stephen, in the next set, I want you to pay attention to your elbow. And he walked away. And I was like, well, wait, coach, tell me, give me some more stuff. Give me what's going on? But you know what happened in the next set? The only thing I could think about was my elbow. He triggered my curiosity, my awareness of my elbow by making that simple statement, a simple question. I wonder if you pay attention to your elbow, he said. And so the next set, I paid attention to my elbow and I realized, oh, my elbow is coming too high on my forehand. And so my shots are going into the net. When I reflected on that later after the match, I thought, you know what he did was he had an ulterior purpose. He was trying to bypass a teenage boy's defensiveness and resistance. What does he know about my forehand? I can have this defensive posture. There's nothing wrong with my elbow. There's nothing wrong with my forehand. There's nothing wrong if he gave this telling approach. But instead, with a simple statement, he made me think. Inside myself, this awareness dawned. This is an ancient technology. Happened with Socrates. We call this the Socratic method. By asking great questions and getting people to ponder and think deeply. Because Socrates learned long centuries ago, once I'm aware, then I can respond. That's why we like to say awareness leads to response ability. If you break that word responsibility apart, what we're really hoping for is someone to respond to the stimulus in the environment, right? That's the goal. One of my favorite authors in the subject of coaching is John Whitmore, and his book, Coaching for Performance, is just an absolute masterpiece. And on our next slide, I have a quote here I'd like to share with you about that he says from this book. Coaching is unlocking people's potential to maximize their own performance. It's helping them to learn rather than teaching them. And I really love this perspective because there's so much already locked up inside of us already. There's so much potential. But the problem with life is we're busy. We got to-do lists. We got emails coming at us and the phone is ringing and we don't stop and get the time to take a moment to pause and think deeply about what's happening around us and what's going on in our environment and what's really going on underneath this, what's happening systemically. So rather than teaching people, which only has a limited lifespan, when you do a coaching approach, they've got it forever. It's that old adage, give a man a fish and he'll eat for a day, teach a man to fish and he'll eat for a lifetime kind of approach. That's coaching. So the art here is in asking great questions. So what does this look like? I'd like to suggest on this next slide a couple of different things that really are key to coaching questions. So when you're approaching this, if you can advance, the open-endedness is really the key first, right? Like, for example, asking the question, what options do you see available to you here in this moment? You're not offering your insight yet. You're leading with this approach to invite the person to think, that's a good question. What are the range of options? A follow-up question you can ask is that all? Or there are any others on this extreme or that extreme? It's kind of be a nice way to do that. Next, you could go to the curiosity position. What's important to you about that? Now, you see, in this question, I'm diving a little deeper, inviting the person to think about their values. I'm thinking about their belief systems. I'm inviting them to connect those to what's happening in the observations that they're making, right? This position is really helpful. Or I could take a future orientation and future focus and ask a question like, well, what would success look like from here? Play this out with me. What would it look like? And just give me a picture. Inviting the coachee to think, what does that look like? And what elements would that have? Now, when you ask questions, one of the key things that's important to learn is the skill of taking your time. Don't just go right quickly to the next question. Let them have some moments to think, to pause, to reflect. Maybe stutter a little bit and stammer and think about this. And then sometimes the next insight triggers in themselves becomes such an important learning moment for them. It can also be very simple, like asking a question such as this one. What's getting in your way? What are the obstacles that you face here in the situation that you find yourself in? And letting them explore that and dive deep into that. Focus on the person, not the problem. I love this question. How are you feeling about this situation? What we know about human dynamics and human behavior is as much as 80% of human decision making happens on an emotional basis, not a logical one. Although we often think it's the flip of that we are logical creatures and not emotional. So by exploring with your person, your coachee, the person in front of you, how are you feeling about this? Can unlock a lot of self-awareness about this person that may be part of the problem for them. It may be the issue that they're faced with, that they're thinking about the situation last week or something else that's not have anything to do with this here that they're dealing with at the moment. This is a powerful question. An action-oriented question might be really helpful, like, what's one small step you can take today? I love this question. Not focusing on solving the whole thing all at once. Don't try to eat the whole elephant, but maybe get them to focus on one small little thing that they can do that might really make a difference. You practice this skill, these questions come more and more naturally. At first, you'll find this new skill and this new mindset really hard to adopt. And when I first began learning this skill, I would have a list of these kind of questions that I would have kind of at my disposal so I could kind of learn from this and kind of go, oh, maybe I'll try this question here and try the curious approach or the simple approach or the future focus approach or action orientation. That really helped me get going. As you get moving more and you practice this more and more in this mindset of leadership, you'll get better and better at it. Here's some other questions we might explore on this next slide. I love this first one in the upper left-hand corner. What if you told yourself a different story? The premise behind that question is we all get a piece of information and we tell ourselves a story filling in the missing details, but we don't really know that that's true or not. Here we're exploring, what if you told yourself a different question? What if the three people who left class in the middle of the session really just forgot to tell you that they had a coaching appointment someplace else, instead of just that they didn't like your teaching? What if you told yourself a different story? What else could be true? Inviting the person to think more broadly instead of just their first blush reaction. What else might be going on here? What would you do if you weren't afraid? Well, that's a fascinating question, right? What might you do if you were bold and just didn't doubt yourself? Too often people doubt themselves and give in to their fear, and that holds them back from taking action. What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? One of my very favorite questions of all time. I love that question, just to explore that, because sometimes in exploring that possibility and having the person paint a picture what that might look like, they find the motivation to go through the obstacles that are necessary to get to that place of success. What have you tried so far? This is a great question to explore. What have you tried? And then you can follow up with, how did that work? Or why didn't that work? What might you have done differently? Question like this one. When have you successfully navigated something similar to this before? This is a very powerful and also an ancient practice that the Jesuits used to teach, sometimes called casuistry. What can you find that was similar to the situation you're in before, that were lessons that you could take from that experience, translate that into your current experience, and find a new way, a novel approach to solve a novel problem? If nothing could hold you back, what would you choose to do next? Again, trying to get past that fear and those obstacles of emotion that might be holding people. If nothing changes, what would it cost you? This is a really good question because obviously the situation has a cost that someone's faced with or dealing with. What does that mean? What does that look like? What are the subtle factors that are going on underneath that? You can explore that with some great questions. Whose perspective might help you see this situation differently? Who might have some insights that I might go talk to and see things in a new way? So those are just a few questions you might start to put in your hip pocket or in a little note card that you carry around with you until this becomes second nature. Megan, you want to talk a little bit more about this curiosity factor that coaching really ignites?
Yeah, at the root of all of these questions and everything that we're reading through and going through today is really a posture of curiosity and application of active listening skills. So we want to really break these down and talk about what we mean and how to foster these as skills and in your leadership and management. So first, with cultivating curiosity, the benefit of this is that curiosity really invites openness rather than judgment. So in a workplace, if someone has been underperforming or you have some negative feedback or negative reaction to them, when we start with questions and we really focus on questions, applying some of the examples that we've showed you today, then we really invite openness to understanding this person's perspective, understanding, okay, what obstacles got in the way when you were trying to accomplish this? What challenges were you facing, rather than a judgment of, hey, you didn't do this on time and I need you to do better next time. While that might be necessary sometimes, and that's helpful feedback, the question first really invites that person to share their side or their challenge, and it shows an openness from you as their manager. It also builds trust, as we talked about previously. Again, you're focused on the relationship here, and you're giving them the opportunity to talk through this with you, rather than jumping straight to a judgment and then ultimately a disciplinary action sometimes. This also strengthens relationships because you're open to their point of view, you're open to understanding where they're coming from, and you're giving them the time it takes to really invest in them and help them to grow in whatever area it might be. This also, of course, deepens your understanding. So if you come into a conversation assuming that you understand everything as the manager, okay, I already know what's going on here. I don't need to ask them because I'm in charge. I know what's happening here. When we flip that on its head and we say, you know what, there's always more I can understand. I might know a few things, but there are things that I need to better understand. And so I want to take a posture of curiosity instead of certainty here. And ultimately, you're really discovering what's actually going on in this scenario. Often when we have people challenges in the workplace, it's never as simple as we think it is, whether identifying and defining the problem or fixing it. It's never really that simple. It's never really that straightforward. And so we really need to understand what's actually happening kind of under the surface that's motivating these issues. On the next slide here, we really in parallel show you the contrast between curiosity and certainty. So often I think as leaders and managers, we think that our job is to come in and be certain. And I would challenge you today that our coaching approach and what we're really trying to instill in everyone today is a posture of curiosity rather than certainty. So this is when you ask rather than assume. You listen to learn rather than listen to respond. So I'm asking kind of what went wrong here so that I can learn, so that you can learn, rather than so that I can tell you how you should do it next time. The third bullet here, curiosity, is really to understand, and certainty, the approach would be to solve. So while we want to get to solution eventually, we're inviting this person to participate in that solution kind of creation and ideation. So rather than solving it for them and giving them the solution, in certainty, understanding that there are multiple ways you can solve a problem, and we want to invite them to participate and give their thoughts as well. We want to have wonder rather than judgment, and explore rather than explain. and invite rather than interrogate. So these are some of the things that you can really think through and challenge yourself. Okay, am I asking rather than assuming? Am I listening to learn, or am I listening to respond? And on the next slide, we have some high level information about active listening. I know this is a skill that we kind of has been drilled into a lot of us who maybe have done trainings and leadership development and other opportunities. This is a really, really important practice. And we might understand the concept of it, but practicing it over and over is really the key here. So in active listening, we want to make sure we're fully present with people, that we remove distractions, we put our phone away, we close our laptop when people are in front of us. We reflect and reframe. So we repeat back to people what we've heard and what we understand they've told us so far, and affirm them. Okay, it sounds like this is really important to you. Might be an example of that as well. We want to pay attention to nonverbal communication and the way that people are showing up. And lastly, holding space. So this can be applied in a lot of different ways, but really resisting the urge to fix or solve, to move quickly onto the next item on the agenda. And especially when you're dealing with more challenging or emotional conversations, to allow space for silence. We don't have to fill the silence immediately with our solution or our idea, but let us sit in that moment so that the other person can really think through what they are taking away from the moment, or what their idea may be. And then Dr. Goodwin will talk for the last few minutes about what this coaching conversation might look like, another practical tool for you to take away with today.
Yeah, thank you, Megan. Yeah, again, if the core magic of leadership happens in the language that they use with people around them, then these conversations are everywhere, right? In all your language and all of your conversations and all the discussion you have with your people, and the written communications, the emails you send, the telephone messages you send, the conversations in meetings, so forth, all of this are opportunities for coaching to take place, right? So in all those conversations, even in the written emails and so forth, to establish context and goals with people, to make sure that you're on the same page. So by asking a question rather than jumping into saying, here's my position, or here's my way of seeing this, you're so much better off as a leader to explore with some questions. Well, Bob, Bill, and Sally, how do you see this? I'm really curious of how you're seeing their current situation, right? And how is the context from your vantage point, and what are you seeing? When I do that as a leader, I'm taking in information that I probably didn't have already, that can expand my own worldview, cause some awareness to happen inside of me, and help me to be more responsible. But I'm also inviting them to do the same thing. And in that interaction of that dynamic and that team of four of us, let's say, we're establishing the context and the goals in a more complex way that more accurately reflects reality. And then we explore in those coaching conversations, what are the possibilities? What we know about human behavior and human decision making is that too quickly we shut off possibilities and lock in on an early opportunity or early possibility too early, and exclude others. So coaching questions allow us to explore a range before we lock into certain actions and decisions. This is a huge advantage in leadership and in any organization and in all of human dynamics. We want to identify what are the things that are blocking us and holding us back. And exploring those with questions and open-ended responses is a way to kind of think through the whole range of those as well, so that we can tackle those and overcome them. And then by exploring actions and accountability, again, in an open-ended way, is a powerful way to explore all of our leadership in every context it comes about. So we want to kind of give you two quick models as we end today. Two models that I come back to time and time again. The first is John Whitmore's GROW model, and I think about this all the time in my leadership. GROW, goal, reality, options. What are you willing to do, or the what, right? So you can ask the question, what's your goal? What are you seeking to accomplish? What's the purpose of this, right? Those kind of questions are key as you begin in this context of a coaching leadership encounter. What's your reality? What's happening? How do you diagnose the situation? Are some questions all around that kind of next step. Thirdly, exploring what are your options? What are the range of possibilities? Which ones do you like and why? Questions around that sort of thing really helps to kind of advance their thinking along this model. And then finally, what are you going to do? What are you willing to do? What will it take? That W model. This is a really great, simple, little, brilliant strategy that will change your leadership dynamic. I guarantee it. I want to give you one more before we end today, and that's the 4A model on this next slide. Agreement, awareness, action, accountability. What's the key issue you're trying to address here? What do you need from me in this conversation, right? We're trying to get to agreement so the person and I in our leadership and followership understand one another, and questions are the way to do that. We also need to have a shared awareness. We often call this a shared mental model here at TurningWest. What ideas you've developed so far? What would you like to be different? What are you hoping for in our relationship as team members together? What's significant to you about this? These are really important things. The feeling questions can go in here. How are you feeling about this possibility or this next step we might take together? This helps us to get on the same page at a deep personal level of awareness. And then moving to the action step. Now, too often, we skip agreement and awareness and we move so quickly to action because we think, well, time is money. We got to get going. Boom, boom, boom. I got so much to do. And that's always a mistake. Take the time to build agreement, to have shared awareness, then move to action. What's your next step? What will move us forward? How do you think we ought to take the next action? And then finally, accountability. How are we going to hold ourselves accountable? How will you know when you've achieved success? When should we check in on this? This is a nice movement and a phrase of movement in any leadership and followership context. So, Megan, we've covered a lot of things. Any last thoughts from you about how people might adopt coaching with questions as a leadership mindset?
I think overall, I would really think about what stood out to you in today's conversation. Think about writing down some of these questions that struck you. As Dr. Goodwin said, I also have a long list of kind of good coaching questions that I'll reference and go back to often to remind myself. We don't always have to have these ready in our head. We can have them as a resource written down. So I would encourage you to do so. And if you're looking for very formal executive coaching, then please reach out to our team. We are ICF certified coaches here at TurningWest and really enjoy this part of our work. I hope you can feel some of the passion around this approach from us. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us directly. But we appreciate your participation and hope you got something good out of this morning's discussion.
That's really helpful. Thank you. And the last thought I would have is that this takes practice. This is a skill that has to be developed like any other skill. It doesn't necessarily come natural. Don't think you're going to get good at it automatically, and don't give up on it because you're not good at it immediately. It will take practice, practice, practice. But as you do this more and more, you will find it makes a huge difference in releasing people's internal motivation and having a great, successful organizational culture around you in every aspect of your life. Thank you very much for joining us today. You can find us on our YouTube channel, turningwest.com, our website, and other places. If we can ever be of service to you, it would be our joy to do so. Thank you very much.